She slapped me across the face and screamed, "You're dead weight in our lives! Go rot in the dump!" My name is Maggie, and that moment nearly broke me. But what happened after might surprise you. Have you ever been treated like a burden by your own family? Tell me what you would have done in my place. The sting of Kaya's palm still burned across my cheek, but it was her words, dead weight, that left a deeper mark. They echoed in the hollow spaces of my chest, long after her footsteps clicked down the hallway, heels sharp against the laminate floor Terrence had laid last spring. She didn't look back at me, not once, as if I were just another stain she'd instructed someone else to scrub away. I sat there, frozen for a moment, hands resting against the sticky vinyl chair that clung to my arms. The air was heavy with the smell of congealed cheese and garlic butter. A half-empty Domino's box slouched on the counter, cardboard spotted with grease that had seeped through. Sunday evening light leaked in through the blinds, striping the dining table in pale gold and shadow. In the distance, I could just catch the faint ring of the church bells, the only reminder that life outside this house moved to a rhythm older and steadier than the sharp edges inside these walls. Earlier, at dinner, Kaya had tossed paper plates across the table like frisbees, one landing upside down in front of me. Terrence had carried the pizza inside, saying nothing, already retreating into that quiet shell of his. The kids next door shrieked in play somewhere beyond the open window, their laughter punctuated by the metallic creak of Robert's old porch swing. That swing still hung at the little house I'd left behind, the last place I'd truly felt safe. I imagined it swaying in the humid air, chains rattling soft as a sigh, an empty seat waiting for me. Kaya slid a plate in front of Terrence, then one for herself. She never looked at me, not really. She referred to me as her if she needed to, as though the word mom stuck in her throat. "Does she want another slice?" she asked, eyes fixed on Terrence, though her voice was loud enough for me to hear. Terrence stared down at his lap, the muscles in his jaw tight but unmoving. He didn't answer. I swallowed hard, folded my napkin, and told myself silence would hurt less than the bite of her words. It was later, after the plates were cleared, that Kaya walked into the living room with a teacup in her hand. She set it down near the edge of the side table, so close to the corner that I knew it would slip. And slip it did, the porcelain tilting, tumbling, and breaking into two neat halves against the rug. Her eyes didn't flicker. "Clean it up, please," she said softly, almost politely, like she was asking a stranger at a diner to pass the salt. I bent down, fingers brushing porcelain edges, feeling the sharpness through the paper towel I wrapped around them. She turned away before I could even stand. I wanted to believe it wasn't deliberate, that she hadn't chosen that moment to remind me who held the power in this house. But the truth lingered in the small smirk she failed to fully suppress. Terrence saw it too. I caught him glance quickly, then away, pretending interest in the muted TV. The silence between us was a gulf that grew wider every day, filled with everything he would not say. The argument came, not long after, in the heat of the same evening. Kaya accused me of meddling, something about the Social Security envelope left unopened in the mailbox, as if I'd placed it there to inconvenience her. She snapped, her voice a whip, and before I could gather my words, the slap landed. Quick, hot, almost casual. My breath caught. Terrence stood at the doorway, lips parted, but no sound came out. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dropped, and then he stepped back, leaving me alone to absorb both the pain and the silence that followed. I pressed my palm to my cheek, the skin warm, my pride colder. The room smelled faintly of bleach, Kaya's weekly attempt to scrub the place into her own domain. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady and indifferent. I gathered myself and walked down the hallway, every step echoing against the hardwood floor that seemed to stretch longer tonight. In my room, I found the envelope sitting crooked on the nightstand, where I'd left it earlier. Its paper was torn from where Kaya had tried to open it first, jagged edges curling outward. The government seal in the corner seemed almost mocking. United States Social Security Administration, a reminder that even the scraps of my independence came through her filter. I slipped a finger inside, pulled out the folded notice, My vision blurred as I read the sterile lines, numbers, dates, warnings. They didn't care how many nights I'd spent awake with worry, how many mornings I'd held my breath hoping the house would be lighter, kinder. I sat on the bed, fingers tracing the quilt Robert's mother had stitched decades ago. One corner was frayed, threads loose where the pattern broke. I thought of the porch swing again, of the comfort I had abandoned. Here, in this house, I was less than a guest. A tenant without rent, a burden measured in utility bills and grocery receipts. Dead weight. The words pressed harder than Kaya's hand ever could. From the hallway, Kaya's laughter drifted in, high and clear, mixing with the faint sound of a sitcom rerun. Terrence murmured something I couldn't make out. My son, caught between two worlds, between the mother who had raised him and the wife who now defined him. I clenched the notice tighter, feeling the paper wrinkle beneath my hand. The air in the room grew heavier, humid with summer, thick with humiliation. I leaned back against the headboard, listening to the hum of the fridge, the tick of the ceiling fan, the muffled scrape of dishes in the sink. Life went on, unbothered, while mine folded in on itself like that torn envelope. And yet, beneath the shame, a quiet pulse began to beat. It was faint, steady, almost like the slow sway of that porch swing in my memory. If I didn't find a way to stand on my own, they'd bury me alive in their pity and scorn. I started writing things down, just a few numbers at first. Small ones, grocery totals that didn't add up, dates on pill bottles that skipped a refill, a transaction on a receipt left folded under the toaster. Things Kaya probably didn't think I'd notice or didn't care if I did. But Robert had told me once, "Always keep your receipts, Maggie. Paper doesn't lie." He'd said it about car repairs, but I was starting to believe it applied to people too. It was early October in Harrisburg, the kind of fall where the air carried wood smoke and the leaves caught fire without burning. The kitchen smelled like Kaya's cinnamon candles and something vaguely chemical from whatever cleanser she favored that week. I sat at the kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of decaf and her unopened designer handbag slumped across the end, a mockery of ease. Underneath the table, I kept my feet tucked close together, knees pressed tight, as if I might make myself smaller and disappear into the laminate floor. Kaya's voice drifted in from the other room, on the phone, laughing, something about a boutique in Philly. I opened the drawer quietly, careful not to make it creak, and slipped my notebook out. It was just a spiral-bound thing from Walgreens, the kind kids use for high school math. The front was torn, and the first few pages were filled with old grocery lists and my handwriting from before. Loopier, less precise. But the recent entries were different. Dates, times, amounts. Circled words like missing meds or $60. Withdrawn, no receipt. One morning, I reached for my pill bottle and found only 3 tablets left. I hadn't skipped a day. When I asked Kaya about it, she shrugged. I must have forgotten to pick them up. "Maybe next week," she said, pouring herself oat milk into a glass shaped like a wine goblet. Her lipstick was perfect, even at 8 o'clock a.m., and I wondered if she practiced talking that way in the mirror. Detached, but civil. I nodded and let the subject drop. But that afternoon, I wrote it down. Missed blood pressure refill. Octane 4, no pickup. I started noticing more after that. ATM slips left on the counter with Terrence's name printed across the top, but the cash always seemed to disappear into Kaya's wardrobe. Twice a week, she returned from errands with new things, a pair of boots with gold accents, a blouse that still had the Nordstrom tag hanging beneath the collar, and once, a coat I recognized from an ad in a glossy magazine. Terrence was never around long enough to ask. He came home late, left early, and kissed Kaya on the cheek like she was porcelain. When he did sit at the table with me, it was with his phone in one hand and a line already rehearsed. "Busy week, big project." I stopped trying to guess if he believed it or if he just needed me to. On Sundays, I insisted on church. Kaya rarely came, and when she did, she rolled her eyes at the casserole table and made comments about wasted time on gossip and cheap coffee. But I found peace in those stained glass windows and Mrs. Peterson's soft-spoken prayers. That fall, Pastor Lewis began a sermon series titled "Truth Sets You Free." I clung to those words like a lifeline. Maybe truth didn't always shout. Maybe it didn't come with dramatic confrontations or slamming doors. Maybe, sometimes, it came through ink and paper, through time-stamped receipts and the quiet conviction of keeping track. After service, Mrs. Peterson offered me a slice of pumpkin pie from the church potluck table. "I used brown butter this year," she said with a wink. "Don't tell the others." I smiled and took a bite. The crust was flakier than anything Kaya ever bothered to make. I watched the children in their Sunday shoes chasing each other through the leaves. For a moment, I felt human again. That evening, while Kaya was out with the girls and Terrence was still at work, I pulled the notebook from under my mattress and flipped through the pages. The entries were longer now, more detailed. I'd started taping receipts inside, highlighting notes with a yellow marker. It felt like building a map, one line at a time, out of a fog I'd been living in too long. I found an old cookie tin, one Robert had used for nails in the garage. I lined it with a dish towel, layered in the notebook, then the receipts. I placed it under my bed, behind a box of shoes no one had touched in years. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. But I felt something different, like standing on the edge of a frozen pond and hearing the first hairline crack beneath someone else's weight. It wasn't loud, but it was real. That night, I sat on the porch steps, the swing long gone, but the memory of its rhythm still in my bones. The moon was low, and somewhere down the block, someone's wind chimes played a lullaby in the breeze. I held a warm mug of tea with both hands, felt the steam against my lips, and let myself breathe. I didn't know then that someone else would soon ask me for proof, someone who'd change everything. The days after Christmas always carried a heaviness, but that winter of 2020 felt heavier than any I could remember. The house seemed to shrink once the garland came down, the lights boxed away, and the tree dragged out to the curb. What lingered wasn't peace, but a suffocating quiet. Every sound seemed sharper, more accusing. The hum of the furnace, the drip in the kitchen sink, the faint rattle of the old window panes against the wind. Kaya had her phone glued to her hand most days. Her laughter, short and sharp, cut through the silence whenever she scrolled past something she found amusing, though it never reached her eyes when she looked up. Terrence buried himself in work emails, sitting in the corner with his laptop, shoulders hunched like he was shrinking into the glow of the screen. Neither of them seemed to notice how the quiet pressed in on me. Or maybe they noticed and liked it that way. I remembered Robert's words, "Never let them make you invisible." He'd said it to me once in passing, years ago, when a neighbor dismissed my opinion about some property line dispute. At the time, I'd laughed it off. But in that house, with Kaya treating me like I was just clutter taking up space, those words took on weight. I repeated them to myself as if they were prayer beads, a rhythm to keep me from disappearing. Outside, January laid a pale quilt across the sidewalks of Harrisburg. Snow gathered at the edges of driveways, turned gray where the salt trucks had passed. Children no longer played in the yards as they had in summer. Instead, the streets were quiet, the only sound the occasional scrape of a shovel against concrete. I watched it all from the porch swing. The swing creaked with every shift of my weight, the same one Robert had built with his hands. It was the last place in that house where I felt tethered to something solid. Kaya's voice drifted out from the living room one afternoon, sharp against the walls. I had gone to put away a stack of folded laundry when I paused near the doorway. "Babysitting dead weight again," she hissed into her phone. Her words hit harder than any slap, though the memory of her hand on my cheek still stung. She must have thought I couldn't hear her, or maybe she didn't care. I stood frozen, laundry basket in my arms, staring at the faded pattern of the rug beneath my feet. I wanted to step into the room, to say something, to demand respect. But the words lodged in my throat. I thought of Terrence, hunched in his corner, pretending he hadn't heard. He always had a way of retreating into silence, leaving me to face Kaya's scorn alone. Later that evening, I sat on the porch swing with my knitting in my lap, though I wasn't stitching anything. The yarn tangled between my fingers as I stared at the bare trees, their branches reaching up like ribs against the gray sky. I imagined Robert sitting beside me, the weight of him in the space where the wood dipped. I rehearsed conversations I would never have had the courage to start. Lines where I told Kaya she had no right to treat me that way, where I told Terrence he was failing not just as a son, but as a man. In my mind, the words came easily, sharp as the wind that cut through my coat. Out loud, all I managed was a sigh that turned white in the cold. The neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, appeared a few days later, carrying a Tupperware of cookies. She had a way of knocking and opening the door at the same time, as if she were part of the family. "Brought too many from the church bake sale," she said, cheeks red from the cold, snow clinging to the soles of her boots. She set the container on the counter and looked at me with that kind of soft concern only older women seem to perfect. Kaya didn't bother to look up from her phone. Terrence muttered something about being late for a conference call and slipped upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen with Mrs. Peterson, grateful for her chatter about choir rehearsals and the latest potluck. She offered me a cookie before leaving, pressing it into my hand like a secret gift. The sugar stuck to my fingertips, and for the first time in weeks, I felt sweetness that wasn't bitter. That night, when the house settled into its routine of clicking keys and scrolling screens, I gathered my things. From the drawer of my nightstand, I pulled the spiral notebook I'd been filling since autumn, the ledger of receipts, dates, small humiliations written in my slanted hand. From the closet, I brought down Robert's old lockbox, and from the bottom shelf, the envelope holding his will. Each piece went into a shoebox I slid under my bed. It wasn't much, just scraps of paper, fading ink, a signature here and there. But together, they felt like armor. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that I mattered. Proof that Kaya's control and Terrence's silence had consequences. As I closed the box, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't courage yet, not fully, but it was preparation. I was ready, even if I didn't know what for. The night pressed in heavy and still. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the furnace hum and the faint drip of the bathroom faucet. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the door. Not the casual tap of a neighbor. Not the hurried pound of delivery. Something deliberate, steady. My breath caught. I looked toward the hallway, the shoebox still warm under my hands. Who could that be on a night like this? I whispered to no one. And in that silence, for the first time in months, I felt the stir of something I hadn't let myself hope for. Change. The knock came again. Steady, patient. Not Kaya's sharp rhythm, not Terrence's fumbling with keys. It carried something else. Something almost like hope tapping through the drizzle. I stood at the threshold of the hallway, pulse quickening. The shoebox of papers still under my bed upstairs. Robert's words surfaced like breath through water. One day, the truth will stand at your doorstep. When I opened the storm door, the cool scent of rain drifted in. Tulips pushed through the soaked earth in the front yard, their heads bobbing beneath drops clinging to the stems. On the porch stood Marcus, taller than I remembered, broader too. His leather jacket glistened with rain, dark patches spreading across the shoulders. He smiled, not the polite smile people wear for strangers, but one that crumpled his eyes the way Robert's used to. "Grandma?" he said. The word wrapped around me like a quilt. No one had called me that in years. He stepped forward, arms out, and before I could second-guess myself, I was pressed into a hug so firm I felt my bones answer back. For a moment, I forgot about the cold, the silence, the walls that had closed in on me all winter. His presence was a doorway opening. When he pulled back, water still clung to his hair. In his hand, he carried a red folder, thick with papers, the corner bent as if it had been studied 100 times. He tapped it against his thigh. "We need to talk." The kitchen smelled faintly of Kaya's perfume, sharp and citrusy, clinging to the air like a warning. Terrence's muddy boots sat by the door, streaking the mat. Marcus placed the folder on the Formica table, the red bright against the faded surface. The sound of it landing echoed like a gavel. Before either of us spoke, Kaya swept in. She wore her robe loose, her hair pulled back carelessly, but her eyes were alert, already sharp. "What's going on here?" Her gaze darted from the folder to Marcus, then to me. "Hi, Kaya," Marcus said evenly, though his jaw tightened. "I'm here for Grandma, and for the truth." Her laugh was brittle. "Truth? You walk in here with a folder like you own the place. Terrence?" But Terrence hovered by the hallway, his tie loosened, his laptop bag slipping off his shoulder. He didn't step forward. He didn't say my name. He just lingered, caught between Kaya's glare and Marcus's steady presence. Marcus flipped open the folder. Neat rows of documents, stamped, signed. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "This is Robert Carter's will. The real one. And I think you know it doesn't match what you've been living off of." Kaya's color rose, two bright patches on her cheeks. She crossed her arms. "You don't know what you're talking about. That paper could be anything." Marcus slid a page across the table, pushing it toward me first. My hands trembled when I touched the paper, not from fear, but from recognition. Robert's signature, ink heavy, loop steady, sat at the bottom. My chest tightened as if he had written it only yesterday. "Grandma," Marcus said softly. "He left it all to you. The house, the accounts, everything. It was never meant to be controlled by them." Kaya's hand slammed the table, rattling the coffee mug by the sink. "This is ridiculous! Terrence, tell him this is nonsense!" But Terrence only rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting anywhere but mine. His silence was louder than her outrage. I sat down, the chair legs scraping against the linoleum. My palms flattened against the page, the weight of it grounding me. "I kept the receipts," I said quietly. "Every withdrawal, every bill, every timesheet." My throat closed, but Marcus's hand covered mine, steady. "I know," he said, "and we'll use them. But first, we're going to make it official." He pulled his phone from his pocket, water still dripping from the case. He dialed quickly, his voice firm. "Yes, Detective Walsh, we're at the house. You'll want to see this." Kaya's eyes widened. "You called the police? You can't. This is a family matter." But her protest carried no weight. The air in the room shifted. For months, I had been the one silenced, the one cornered. Now Kaya looked small, her robe wrapped tighter, her lips pressed thin. Rain pattered against the gutters as a car pulled into the driveway. The knock that followed was brisk, professional. Marcus opened the door to a woman in a dark coat, badge glinting faintly beneath the porch light. Detective Sarah Walsh introduced herself, voice straightforward, eyes direct. "We received a call about financial irregularities and possible exploitation," she said. She stepped inside, surveying the room with quiet authority. "I'll need to speak with you, ma'am." Her eyes met mine, not Kaya's. For the first time in months, someone looked at me as if I mattered. I led her to my room. The shoebox waited under the bed. I slid it out, the cardboard worn soft at the corners, the lid lifting to reveal months of notes, receipts, folded slips of paper. I placed the ledger on top, its spiral bent but intact. Detective Walsh opened the box slowly, scanning the contents. "This is detailed," she said. "More than most cases start with." My voice didn't shake. "I've kept every piece of paper. I want this on record." Behind her, Kaya lingered in the hallway, arms crossed, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The detective closed the box, nodding once. Marcus stood tall beside her, the red folder under his arm, rain still clinging to the leather of his jacket. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one shrinking in fear. It was Kaya who looked away. The courtroom smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper, a sterile mix that carried more weight than perfume ever could. To others, it was ordinary. To me, it was the scent of reckoning long overdue. The benches gleamed from years of bodies shifting nervously on them, wood polished not by cloth, but by human worry. Above us, fluorescent lights hummed like bees in a trapped hive. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, watching the judge enter. His robe swayed slightly, his steps measured, every move reminding me this was not a kitchen spat or whispered insult. It was law, and law had finally come to stand between me and those who had fed off me. The bailiff's voice echoed, All rise. My knees ached as I stood, but I held steady. Across the aisle, Kaya smoothed her skirt, lips pressed in what she thought was a sympathetic line. She fooled no one but herself. Terrence lingered at her side, shoulders slumped, his tie knotted too tight, his eyes fixed on the table. When I took the stand, the Bible felt cool in my hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. My voice carried more clearly than I expected. Years of being shushed had not broken it. I told my story. Not all at once, but in measured words, each detail chosen like a stone placed carefully into a wall. I spoke of envelopes that arrived unopened, of receipts left on counters, of dinners where silence was a weapon sharper than any knife. The courtroom listened. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to quiet as I described the slap, not as violence, but as punctuation to the contempt that lived in that house. Kaya leaned back, smirking as if my words amused her. But every now and then she shifted in her chair, heels tapping, a small betrayal of nerves. The attorney asked me to explain the ledger. I unfolded the notebook, spiral bent, pages crinkled from nights of hurried writing. I pointed to dates, withdrawals, handwriting. This was supposed to be grocery money. Instead, it was cash for handbags. Here, this line, this was the week I went without medication. My finger lingered on the ink. The silence afterward was thicker than the walls around us. Next came the shoebox, worn soft at the corners. I lifted it carefully, as though the truth inside could spill. One by one, the exhibits appeared. Folded ATM slips, notes in my handwriting, the will Robert had signed. The court clerk marked each piece, fingers racing across her ledger. The attorney asked, "Mrs. Carter, did you keep these records yourself?" "Yes, every piece. I knew one day paper would have to speak louder than my voice." Marcus sat straight in the witness chair after me. He testified calmly, his words sharp where mine had been patient. He spoke of conversations, bank statements he had compared, how Robert's will had been ignored. He confirmed what I had felt in my bones, that I had not been imagining, exaggerating, or losing touch. Across the aisle, Kaya adjusted her posture, painting herself in innocence, but her foot tapped faster now. Terrence never looked up. The courtroom had its own rhythm, the court reporter's fingers rattling across the stenograph, the shuffle of papers, the occasional cough echoing too loudly. But beneath it all was the beat of something heavier, a drum roll leading toward judgment. Finally, the judge leaned forward. His glasses caught the light, reflecting a square of brightness onto the bench. This court finds sufficient evidence of financial exploitation and undue influence. Authority over the estate is hereby removed from Kaya and Terrence Morrison. Charges for elder abuse will proceed. Custodianship returns to Margaret Carter. The gavel struck wood, sharp, final. In my chest, something else broke free. Not just relief, but the weight of years lifting, like air filling a room that had been sealed too long. I looked across the aisle. Kaya's face was pale, the smirk gone. Terrence's shoulders sagged, and for the first time in a long time, he looked not powerful, but small. Behind me, Marcus laid a hand on my shoulder. Warm, steady. I imagined the porch swing waiting at home, chains creaking gently in the winter wind. It would still be there, silent, a witness to the fact that I had not disappeared, that I had not been erased. The judge's voice faded into the scrape of chairs, the shuffle of people leaving. My story was now part of the record, carved not in whispers, but in law. And as the courtroom emptied, I sat still, breathing in the scent of floor polish and old paper, knowing that reckoning had finally come and stayed. The swing creaked under my weight, a familiar sound, but for the first time it carried me forward instead of pulling me back. I pushed gently with my feet, the old chains groaning in rhythm. The morning sun settled on my shoulders, warm but not punishing, and cicadas already hummed as though they had been waiting for me. The roses bloomed along the edge of the yard, a flush of red and pink Robert would have admired. On the porch table beside me sat the small ceramic blue bird he once gave me. Its glaze had chipped at the wing, but in the light, it shone like something new. Renewal, sitting right beside my coffee mug. The house behind me smelled of fresh paint and lemon polish. I had insisted on painting the porch a soft white myself, though Marcus offered to hire someone. My hands bore the proof. Tiny specks of white along the nails, a faint streak at the wrist. But I had wanted that work to be mine. Ownership begins with the things you touch, I realized. Even the lock on the front door was new, the brass glinting in the sun. When the key turned smoothly beneath my hand for the first time, I had stood there longer than necessary, palm resting on the knob, just to feel what it was like to hold authority again. Mornings had become mine to shape. I woke early, boiled water, and poured coffee into the same cracked cup I had carried from the courthouse night. The fracture had not widened. It held steady, like me. I walked outside barefoot, feeling the porch boards cool against my soles, and tended Robert's roses. I snipped away brown edges, pulled weeds from the soil, and watered carefully until the dirt darkened, the smell of earth rising sweet and clean. The garden gave me something solid, no judgment, no demand, just growth, patient and unhurried. One afternoon, as cicadas roared like a summer choir, I found the letter. It came in a plain envelope, the paper thin, the return address printed from a correctional facility. Terrence's handwriting filled the page, uneven, rushed. He wrote of regret, of time lost, of nights spent staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine how to say he was sorry. He wrote about Kaya too, admitting things I had already known but had longed to hear from him. His words were not excuses, they were raw, unpolished, the way confessions are when they finally find a crack to escape through. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter open before me, fingers resting on the page. Hurt pressed in first, memories of silence, of him looking away when I needed him to speak. But love threaded through too, stubborn as the roses that bloomed again each year despite frost. He was still my son. Nothing could erase that. Yet love without boundaries had nearly destroyed me once, and I could not let it again. So I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer by the phone. Not in the trash, not in my pocket. Somewhere in between, where hurt and hope could live side by side until I was ready to decide. Mrs. Peterson visited the next week, carrying a pie still warm from her oven. "Peach this time," she said, smiling as though pie could solve anything. Maybe it could. We sat together on the porch, forks clinking against tin, cicadas buzzing louder than our words. She talked about her grandson starting college, about the choir returning to Sunday services. I listened, grateful for her presence. Sometimes healing arrived in the form of company that asked for nothing in return. Later, Marcus came by with groceries, his laughter spilling into the kitchen before he even set the bags down. "Grandma," he said, using the word easily now, as though it had always belonged. He helped me put away milk, bread, and a box of cereal he claimed was non-negotiable. Then he followed me onto the porch, plopping into the chair beside the swing. For a while, we just listened to the cicadas, letting the summer day wrap around us. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think dignity was something people gave you. A title, a paycheck, a house. But you showed me it's something you keep for yourself, even when others try to take it away." His eyes shone, not with pity, but with pride. My throat tightened, but I managed to smile, patting his hand the way I once had when he was a boy. The climax came quietly, in the smallest of actions. I rose from the swing, walked to the door, and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth click. My hand did not tremble. The house was mine, not by inheritance or by gift, but by endurance. Each board, each rose, each swing of the porch chains carried my mark now. The weight I had carried for years, burden, silence, invisibility, did not follow me through that doorway. As the morning sun warmed my face, I knew I wasn't anyone's burden. I was free. The swing creaked again as I sat back down, coffee steaming in my hand, roses breathing their scent across the yard. The cicadas hummed their endless song. The bluebird gleamed beside me, its chipped wing catching the light. I thought of Robert, of the ledger, of the gavel striking wood. Each moment had led here, to a quiet porch, a steady lock, and a morning I could finally call my own. If there is one truth I can leave behind, it is this. Dignity is not negotiable. It does not wait for permission. It grows in the smallest acts, the turning of a key, the tending of a rose, the creak of a swing carrying you forward. And if you guard it, as I have learned to, it will carry you through even the cruelest silences into the kindest light. Sitting on the porch swing in the morning light, I felt the breeze carry me forward instead of pulling me back. In life, dignity isn't built on grand gestures, but on the small things. A locked door, roses in bloom, a heart still open to kindness. Families may falter, but love always finds its way home when we set boundaries without closing our hearts. If this story touched you, I'd be grateful for your reflections. So together we can remember that dignity and love are always worth protecting.